Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you are new here. I'm Andrea M and this is Real Crime Down Under, and we have another subscriber requested video from my dear subscriber Malcolm, and he's been a constant subscriber and has been with the channel right from the beginning. He always watches and comments and always gives me his support. Even if it's a video he's not that interested in, he still watches to help support me and the channel, which I'm so thankful for. And that's why I am presenting this video today, which was requested by Malcolm. And he gave me the names of two historical criminals today, and that is the life and crimes of Ronald Ryan and Peter Walker. Ronald Ryan was also the last man hanged in Australia in 1957 after his escape from Pentridge Prison. And this would also be where he would meet his fellow escapee and partner in crime, Peter Walker. But before we explore today's case, may I ask you to please consider subscribing to my channel if you've not done so already. Smack the heck out of the like button, turn on notifications so that you never miss a video, and leave a comment or two on what you thought of today's case in the comments section below. Or you can drop a suggestion of a case you'd like to see me cover in the future. And before we get into today's video, I'd like to apologise that I didn't upload last week, and I'm a little embarrassed to say I got sick again. This winter is not being kind to me at all. I ended up with influenza A. I was extremely sick all last week. I had absolutely no sleep. I couldn't stop coughing. As you guys know, I had COVID earlier in the winter. Before that, I was suffering histamine intolerance, which all of you who've been here all along already know all this. But I think maybe the histamine intolerance has given my immune system a real hammering, and then having COVID, and then of course after the COVID came long COVID, which I'm still dealing with, and I was just starting to actually feel quite a bit better when I noticed I was getting sick with the influenza A. I had also just started going back to help my friend in her shop. I have a friend and I go in and I help her with her shop once a week, usually every Friday, and it was like my first day back to work at the shop. And everything was just panning out beautifully. I had a wonderful day. I had a paranormal consult that afternoon, met some great people. And then by that night, I was starting to feel a little bit weird again. And I was like, oh, no, come on. I can't be getting sick again. We had the next day, went out to help Mum with a few things and play with the dogs. And by that night, I was just feeling absolutely terrible. By the next day, my throat was all swollen up again. Couldn't talk, just coughing constantly, no energy at all. Quite sick, couldn't eat anything, and that was me all last week. So that's why I didn't get a video done, and I apologise to you guys. I didn't make a community post because I honestly just didn't have the wherewithal to do one, and I was also feeling just slightly embarrassed because every time you look at me, I'm sick. But I'm hoping this should be the last of it for this winter. I cannot get sick anymore. I'm just over it at this point. I am still coughing a lot, so hopefully I can get through the video without coughing all over the place. But if that happens, I apologise. So, pray for me, everyone, that I don't keep getting sick, because I really just want to continue making content for you guys. Also, a quick update on my last video. I did mention we are working on a special location to film what we thought was going to be our next paranormal video. Unfortunately, I did get some communication back from the location yesterday, and they have looked over the proposal, but they do need to meet and have a committee meeting about granting us permission to film at the particular location. They have to see if it's viable at all and how many of their own staff they would need to have on hand for us if we are in fact granted permission to go in and film. So we do have an investigation coming up. I think I've earmarked it for the 29th of July, but it's not going to be at the original location because the meeting will not be taking place until the 26th. And we wanted to go and do the investigation actually on the 21st of July that's not going to be happening now. So fingers crossed that at some point I can come back and say, okay, they granted us permission and this is when we'll be doing it. But until then, we have found another location which is just as good, and I think you guys will really enjoy. So hopefully I can just keep going from strength to strength and not get sick anymore, and keep the videos coming for you guys with all the videos that I do, including the paranormal. So without further ado, let's just get into today's story. And I'm just going to start with Joseph Ryan, Ronald Joseph Ryan, and just let it roll from there, because he doesn't actually meet Walker until he goes to prison. And it seems to me, rather strangely, he had quite a normal life before he turned to crime. So I'm just going to run through his history and bring you up to where he meets his partner in crime, Peter Walker. So let's just begin. So Ronald Joseph Ryan was born on the 21st of February 1925, and he was also the last person to be legally executed in Australia. Ryan was found guilty of shooting and killing Warder George Hodson during an escape from Pentridge Prison, Victoria in 1965. Ryan's hanging was met with public protests by those who opposed capital punishment, and capital punishment was abolished in Australia by all states in 1985. So Ronald Ryan was actually born as Ronald Edmund Thompson, and he was born at the Royal Women's Hospital in Melbourne's inner suburb of Carlton to John Ronald Ryan, his father, and Cecilia Thompson. Cecilia already had a son with her first husband, George Harry Thompson, and was living with John Ryan. Cecilia and George had separated in 1915 when George left to fight in the Great War, and the relationship never resumed upon his return. Cecilia met Ryan while working as a nurse in Woods Point, where he was suffering from lung disease. They formed a relationship in 1924 and later married in 1929. And this was after her first husband's death in 1927. You're never going to believe the way this poor fellow died. He had actually been riding on a tram, and he fell from the tram and got hit by a car. It was after this that Ronald then adopted the name Ronald Edmund Ryan. In 1936, Ryan was confirmed in the Roman Catholic Church. He took as his confirmation name Joseph and became Ronald Edmund Joseph Ryan. And he didn't like the Edmund, and from then on he just used Ronald Joseph Ryan. So for those of you who aren't Catholic, and I did used to be, I'm not anymore, and I'm not sure if they still do this or not, but when you were confirmed into the Catholic faith, it used to happen when you're about like 11 or 12, something like that, you would also be given a confirmation name. And I don't even know if I had one. I remember getting confirmed, but might have been Teresa, like after my great-great-grandmother. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not in that anymore, so I don't know what they do these days, or I've kind of blocked that out because it wasn't a pleasant experience for me. But anyway, that's what they used to do. Back then, I assume they might still, but that's how you get a confirmation name. His three sisters were made wards of the state a year later when authorities declared them to be neglected. His sisters were sent to the Good Shepherd Convent in Collingwood, and Ryan and his brother George were sent to Rupert's Wood, which I assume was a boys' home, and they absconded from there in 1939. And after that, they worked in and around Balranald in New South Wales. And they would earn spare money from sleeper cutting and kangaroo shooting, and they would send that to their mother, who was then looking after their sick and alcoholic father. At the age of 20, Ryan had saved enough money to rent a house in Balranald, and he collected his mother and his sisters, and they lived together in the house. Ryan's father had stayed in Melbourne and died a year later, aged 62, after a long battle with Meniere's disease, also known as phthisis tuberculosis. So, aged about 22, Ryan then decided to join his brother George, who was tomato farming near Tatura, Victoria. He started visiting Melbourne on weekends, and during one of these weekend trips, he would meet his future wife, Dorothy Janet George. On the 4th of February 1950, Ryan married Dorothy at St. Stephen's Anglican Church in Richmond, Victoria. So at this time, he actually converted from Roman Catholicism to the Church of England in order to marry her, but he converted back to Catholicism shortly before his execution. Dorothy was the daughter of the mayor of the Melbourne suburb of Hawthorn, and Ryan and Dorothy would go on to have 3 daughters, Janice, Wendy and Rhonda. They did have a 4th child who was unfortunately stillborn. So after spending a few months working for his father-in-law as a trainee mechanic, Ryan decided that more money could be made timber cutting near Marysville and Lycola. When it was too wet to cut timber, Ryan got a job painting for the State Electricity Commission. And by 1952, the Ryan family was living in the next suburb over, fairly close to where they were before in New G. Trouble with the law started when his rented house burnt down. Ryan was away for the weekend in Melbourne when the arsonist struck. The arsonist was caught and claimed that Ryan had actually put him up to it in order to collect insurance money. His first appearance in court was in Warragul in 1953, and he was acquitted on a charge of arson. In 1956, Ryan appeared in court for passing bad cheques in Dandenong. He was given a bond. His next appearance in court was issued after a large number of forged cheques in Warrnambool. Seems to be a lot of crime circulating around Warrnambool. That name comes up a lot. His partner was caught with the goods purchased with the bad cheques and handed Ryan over to the police. He received another good behaviour bond after the arresting detective gave a favourable character reference on his behalf. Though Ryan would go on to serve prison time. He first served prison time at the Bendigo prison, here under Ian Grindlay, who would later become the governor of Pentridge. He appeared to rehabilitate himself, and he was studying for his matriculation. And that's a very old, outdated term, I think, like for this day and age, but matriculation back then meant it was just the completion of 12 years of formal schooling. So it'd be like getting your VCE or your HSC, or you're graduating your senior year in high school, is what that meant. He was released on parole in 1963. He was regarded by the authorities at this time as a model prisoner. So he would then go on to work as a clerk for a couple of months, but then he would go to lunch one day from his clerk job and he never returned. He then started robbing butcher shops and used explosives to blow their safes. So Ryan and 2 accomplices were caught after a butcher shop robbery on the 4th of January 1964. He was charged with breaking and entering and theft offences on the 6th of January 1964. He was bailed on the 3rd of February, and Ryan skipped town and fled to New South Wales. He later admitted to 9 robberies in New South Wales between the 4th of April and the 11th of July 1964. On a visit home on the 14th of July, he was caught by Victoria Police in the early hours of the next morning. On the 13th of November 1964, he received an 8-year prison sentence for breaking and entering and was sent to Pentridge Prison. After Ryan was sentenced to Pentridge Prison, he was placed in B Division, where he would go on to meet fellow prisoner and partner in crime, as it would turn out, Peter John Walker. And Peter John Walker was born on the 5th of May 1941, and he was serving a 12-year sentence for bank robbery. When Ryan was informed that his wife was seeking a divorce, he made a plan to escape from prison. Walker decided to go along with him. Ryan planned to take himself and his family to flee to Brazil, which did not have an extradition treaty with Australia at the time. At the bottom of the stairs, so this is like the bottom of the stairs, like from where they would have come down to try and launch this prison break. So at the bottom of the stairs was the night officers' lodge. Warder Fred Brown was returning from lunch to relieve another warder named Lang when he was confronted by the escapees. So Brown gave them no resistance, but when Ryan realised Lang had tricked him, he jabbed the rifle into Lang's back and marched him up the stairs so Lang could pull the correct lever to open the tower gate. And in this research, it doesn't actually say how Lang tricked him. I don't know if Lang was pretending to be asleep or if he pulled the wrong lever. Like I said, this is a very old case, so a lot of the details on it are sketchy, but I'm doing the best with what I have. So for some reason or other, this other guard named Lang tried to trick these men, and it didn't go so well. So they've got him to pull the correct lever to open the tower gate. And the two escapees then exited through the gate into the prison car park. Now, here comes a little bit of Final Destination stuff for you again. To the escapees' dismay, there were only 2 cars in the car park and one had a flat tyre. How is that for unlucky? That's just Final Destination stuff. However, they did encounter the prison chaplain, Brigadier James Hewitt of the Salvation Army, and he was unlucky enough to be in the car park. The escapees grabbed Hewitt and used him as a shield. Ryan, armed with the rifle, pointed it at Hewitt and demanded his car. Prison Officer Bennett in Tower 2 saw the prisoners. Ryan called to Bennett to throw down his rifle. Bennett ducked out of sight and then grabbed his rifle. When Hewitt told Ryan he did not have his car that day, Ryan rifle butted him in the head, causing serious injuries. Les Watt, a petrol attendant who watched the escape from a petrol station on Sydney Road, witnessed Ryan hitting Hewitt with the rifle. The escapees then left the badly injured chaplain on the ground, and Ryan ran out to Champ Street, directly in front of the southwest corner of the prison. Walker went south across Church Street towards the adjacent Roman Catholic Church in Sydney Road. Prison Officer Bennett had his rifle aimed at Walker and ordered Walker to halt or he would shoot. Walker took cover behind a small wall that bordered the church. The prison alarm was raised by Warder Lang and it began to blow loudly, indicating a prison escape. Unarmed warders Wallace and Mitchinson and Patterson came running out of the prison's main gate and onto the street. Both men were running towards the armed Ryan. Meanwhile, confusion and noise were increasing around the busy intersection of Sydney Road and O'Hay Street and across to the Champ Street intersection, with Ryan waving the rifle around trying to get cars to stop so that he could commandeer them, and people ducking for cover between the cars. So there was a couple travelling along the street by the name of Frank and Pauline Jaworski, and they were travelling south on Champ Street and had slowed to give way to the traffic on Sydney Road when Ryan, armed with a rifle, appeared right in front of their car. Ryan threatened the driver and his passenger. He yelled at them to get out of the car. The driver, Frank Jaworski, turned his car off, put it in neutral, and then got out of the vehicle. Ryan got in via the driver's side door. Surprisingly, Pauline Jaworski refused to leave the car. She was persuaded by Ryan to get out, only to go back in the car to get her handbag. Patterson, realising Ryan was armed, returned inside the prison to get a rifle. Warder William Mitchinson was first to reach the car and grabbed Ryan through the driver's window. He told Ryan the game's up. Warder Thomas Wallace, who was following, ran to Pauline Jaworski's side of the car. He grabbed her and pulled her away. In frustration, Ryan forced Mitchinson to back off, then got out of the passenger's side door and noticed Walker running towards him, being chased by Hodson, who was holding a pipe in his hand. Walker was shouting frantically to Ryan that prison guard William Bennett, standing on the number 2 prison tower, had his rifle aimed at both of them. At this time, Hodson was chasing Walker. Ryan took a couple of steps forward, raised his rifle, aimed at Hodson, and fired. George Hodson fell to the ground. He had been struck by a single bullet that exited through Hodson's back, about an inch lower than the point of entry in his right chest. Hodson died in the middle of Sydney Road. Patterson, now with a rifle, ran back outside and on to Champ Street. Ryan and Walker ran past the critically wounded Hodson. Ryan and Walker would then run past the critically wounded Hodson and commandeered a blue standard Vanguard sedan on Sydney Road from its driver, Brian Mullins. With Walker driving and Ryan a passenger, the car travelled through an adjacent service station and then west along O'Hay Street. Ryan and Walker successfully eluded their pursuers outside Pentridge Prison and drove away before changing cars. They then made their way south, following the Moonee Ponds Creek to change cars again before hiding in a safe house in Kensington provided by Norman Harold Murray. The following day, the men moved into Christine Aiken's flat in Ormond Road, Elwood. The prison escape dominated newspapers and other media. One newspaper reported that Ronald Ryan, serving time for burglary, seized a prison officer and shot him 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the back. Reports of their activities caused widespread anxiety. On December 23, Ryan, armed with the warder's rifle, and Walker robbed an ANZ bank in North Road, Ormond. Ryan herded 13 people into the bank's strong room and stole around about £45,000. A witness, June Crawford, told reporters, "A bandit told me this gun shot a man a few days ago." On the 24th of December 1965, the Victorian government announced a £6,000 reward for information leading to the capture of Ryan and Walker. And in case some of you guys don't know that are from other countries and younger people from Australia, back then in the 60s, we didn't actually have decimal money. We had pounds, shillings and pence. And from what my mum's told me, that was actually a really hard currency to kind of work out and do anything with, and they eventually converted over to the Australian dollar. But back then it was different, so that's why the reward money and the money that they stole is in pounds, just to stop any confusion. We do have dollars here in Australia now. The £6,000 reward is offered for the information leading to the capture of Ryan and Walker. It was reported in The Age that the Chief Secretary and Attorney General Arthur Ryler had issued a warning to the escapees that the killing of Hodson during the prison escape was the worst Victoria had ever known at that time, and the Hanging Act was still in force. On December 24th, which of course is Christmas Eve, there was a party at the flat. A petty criminal, John Fisher, who knew Ryan, and Arthur Henderson, Aiken's boyfriend, were there. After all the beer had been consumed, Walker and Henderson left to find a sly grog in Albert Park for more drinks. An hour later, Walker returned alone to the flat. He had killed Henderson in the middle of the park toilet block, having shot him in the back of the head. Well, isn't he a lovely friend? You go out to get a few beers and your mate shoots you in the back of the head. That's just a stand-up guy right there. Unbelievable. There was no reason for him to do it either. I think he just wanted to kill somebody, maybe. The escapees left the flat and returned to Kensington. On the 26th of December, Aiken and another woman were charged with harbouring the criminals. They came forward after Henderson was killed and the escapees had left. The charges were later dropped. The pair returned to hiding in the basement of the house in Kensington. Murray was given money to buy a car in Sydney and return with it. Murray returned with the car with Queensland plates on the 31st of December, New Year's Eve. Ryan and Walker left for Sydney on the 1st of January 1966 and arrived on the 2nd. And this brings us around to how these two lovely, lovely men were recaptured. So after arriving in Sydney, Ryan and Walker endeavoured to establish some safe houses. Ryan also wanted to make contact with a woman he knew when he was in Sydney a few years ago. She was not home, but her daughter was. Ryan made an arrangement to meet the woman and the daughter at Concord Repatriation Hospital on the evening of the 6th of January. Unknown to Ryan, the daughter recognised Ryan and tipped him off to the police. Acting on the information, Detective Inspector Ray Gunner Kelly was alerted to their presence. D.I. Kelly, with a heavy armed contingent of 50 police officers and detectives, set a trap for them. When the escapee's car pulled up near the hospital, Ryan walked over to a nearby telephone box, but it had been deliberately put out of order, so he walked over to a neighbouring shop and asked to use the phone there. The owner had been instructed to tell Ryan that his phone was also out of order, and as Ryan walked out of the shop, he was tackled by 6 detectives, dropping a loaded .32 revolver that he had been carrying. At the same moment, Detective Sergeant Fred Cray thrust a shotgun through the car window and held it at Walker's head, and he was captured without struggle. Ryan Walker had been on the run for 19 days. In the boot of the car, police found 3 pistols, a shotgun and 2 rifles, all fully loaded, an axe. Okay, I'm not sure what this is. A jemmy, 2 coils of rope and a hacksaw and 2 boiler suits. So these guys were definitely not planning anything good to be happening in Sydney. So it's lucky that the daughter was of the lady they were trying to hook up with that was brave enough to actually dob them into the police and have them captured before they could do any other dreadful crimes against people or banks or whatever they were going to be doing. So it's after this Ryan and Walker were extradited back to Melbourne. They were jointly tried for the murder of George Hodson. It is alleged that Ryan made 3 verbal confessions to police whilst being extradited to Melbourne. According to police, Ryan admitted to them he had shot prison officer Hodson. However, these verbal allegations were not signed by Ryan, and he denied making such verbal or written confessions to anyone. The only signed document by Ryan was that he would give no verbal testimony. Walker was also tried for the shooting murder of Arthur James Henderson during the period when he and Ryan were at large. On the 15th of March 1966, the case of the Queen versus Ryan and Walker began in the Supreme Court of Victoria. The first day was spent choosing the makeup of the jury. Ryan and Walker were each exercised in their legal right in objecting to 20 candidates. The Crown's case presented no scientific evidence. The fatal bullet and the spent cartridge casing were never recovered, so no ballistic or forensic evidence was available to prove that Ryan had indeed fired the fatal shot. The Crown's case relied on only eyewitnesses who were near Pentridge Prison when Hodson was shot and killed, and because there was no forensic evidence to prove Ryan even fired a shot. Each eyewitness testified to a different account of what they saw and where Ryan was standing. 11 eyewitnesses swore that they saw Ryan waving and aiming his rifle. There were variations whether Ryan was standing, walking or squatting at the time a single shot was heard, and whether Ryan was to the left or the right of Hodson. Only 4 eyewitnesses testified that they saw Ryan fire a shot. 2 eyewitnesses testified they saw smoke coming from Ryan's rifle. 2 eyewitnesses testified that they also saw Ryan's weapon recoil. Some witnesses testified that they saw Ryan's rifle recoil when he fired and also saw smoke coming from the end of the rifle. The owners of the car that Ryan got into, Frank and Pauline Jazorski, were 2 of the witnesses. A warder, Thomas Wallace, testified that he saw smoke coming out of the rifle Ryan was holding. Pauline Jazorski testified that she smelled gunpowder after Ryan had fired the fatal shot. At trial, all prison officers testified that they did not see Hodson carrying anything and they did not see Hodson hit Walker. However, 2 witnesses, Louise Bailey and Keith Dobson, testified that they saw Hodson carrying something like an iron bar or a baton as he was chasing after Walker. Governor Grindley testified that he did not see a bar near Hodson's body, but that he found one after Hodson's body was loaded into the ambulance. The Crown also relied upon unrecorded, unsigned testimony that Ryan had allegedly verbally confessed to shooting Hodson. Detective Sergeant KP Bill Waters told the court that on the 6th of January 1966, the day after his recapture in Sydney. In the heat of the moment, you do sometimes do an act without thinking. I think this is what happened with Hodson. He had no need to interfere, he was stupid. He was told to keep away. He grabbed Pete and hit him with the iron bar. He caused his own death. I didn't want to shoot him. I could have shot a lot more. And this is his confession. Detective Senior Constable Harry Morrison told the court that on the 7th of January 1966, during the flight returning Ryan back to Melbourne, Ryan had said, "The water spoilt the whole show. If he had not poked his great head into it, he would not have got shot. It was either him or Pete." Nice. The Crown also called the 2 bank officers from the bank that Ryan and Walker robbed, Robert Sipthorpe and George Robertson. They testified that Ryan said, "This is the gun that shot a man the other day." At trial, Ryan's defence lawyer, Philip Opus, cross-examined the 2 witnesses, asking if instead they heard, "This is the type of gun that shot a man the other day." But both witnesses would stick to their story. John Fisher, who had a long criminal history and had not seen or heard from Ryan for more than 2 years, testified that he asked Ryan who had shot Hodson. Fisher said Ryan told him that he had in fact shot Hodson. None of these verbal confessions were signed by Ryan, who only signed documents saying that he would give no verbal testimony, as we explored before. Ryan testified he had been verbaled and denied the allegations of verbal confessions said to have been made by him. So, the defence's case, the main problem for the defence was that Victoria had the Jails Act of 1958, which stated as follows: "Every male person lawfully imprisoned for any crime, misdemeanour or offence in the sentence of any court or competent jurisdiction, or employed at labour as a criminal on the roads or other public works of Victoria, who escapes or attempts to escape from any jail or from the custody of any member of the police force, jailer or other officer in whose custody he may be, shall be guilty of felony. If a killing occurs by an act of violence in the course of a commission of a felony involving violence or in the furtherance of the purpose of such a felony, the accused is guilty of murder even though there is no actual intention of killing." So, felony murder. The defence did spend a lot of time arguing about when the time of the felony ended. Did it end after the prisoners had cleared the prison walls, or was it once the prisoners were caught and returned to custody? The defence pointed to various substantial discrepancies in the Crown's case. While some eyewitnesses testified they saw Ryan to the east of Hodson when a single shot was heard, other eyewitnesses testified Ryan was to the west of Hodson. The discrepancies in the evidence were substantial and wide-ranging. Opus contended that each of the 14 eyewitnesses' evidence was so contradictory that little store could be placed upon them. Philip Opus produced a human skeleton as a visual aid to explain the trajectory of the fatal bullet. Opus argued that the ballistics evidence indicated that the fatal bullet entered Hodson's chest, body in a downward trajectory. He also got a Monash University mathematics professor, Terry Speed, to explain that Ryan, 5 feet 8 inches or 1.73 metres tall, would have had to have been 8 feet 3 inches or 2.51 metres tall to fire the shot. These calculations were based on Ryan being 20 feet from Hodson, and Hodson was standing perfectly upright. The bullet would enter Hodson's body 62 inches from the ground and exit 61 inches from the ground. If the shot was in a downward angle, the bullet would have hit the road 40 feet from where Hodson was hit. It also suggested that Hodson could have been shot from another elevated point and possibly by another prison officer. It would cast doubt that Ryan had fired the fatal shot, but the prosecution argued that Hodson, 6 feet 1 inch, 1.85 metres tall, could have been running in a stooped position, thus accounting for the bullet's fatal angle of entry. No witnesses saw or testified seeing Hodson running in the stooped position, however. The trajectory theory put forward by Opus, the trial judge dismissed the theory, as did the judges at the appeal 2 months later. They said there was enough evidence to say Hodson was not standing fully erect but was running in a forward-leaning position when he was in fact shot. Opus, in defending Ryan, put a lot of pressure on a warder who made conflicting statements. Patterson had made several mutually contradictory statements to police about what he saw, what he heard, and what he did on that day. In his first statement given to Detective Sergeant Carton on the 19th of December 1965, Patterson said, "I did not hear a shot fired other than the one I fired." In a second statement given to Senior Detective Morrison on the 12th of January 1966, Patterson said, "Just as I turned into the entrance to the garden, I heard a shot." In a third statement on the 3rd of February 1966, Patterson said, "I ran back inside and asked for a gun. I went to the main gate and I received a gun and ran back outside. As I was running onto the lawn, I heard the crack of a shot." Patterson changed his story too about who was in the line of fire when he aimed his rifle. In his first statement, Patterson said, "I sighted my rifle at Ryan and was about to fire when a woman walked into the line of fire and I lifted my rifle." In his second statement, Patterson said, "I took aim at Ryan, but 2 prison officers were in the line of fire, so I dropped my rifle again." In his third statement, Patterson said, "I took aim at Ryan and I found out I had to fire between 2 prison officers to get Ryan, so I lowered my gun again." Ryan testified that he kept his rifle to prove his innocence in the event of recapture, as he knew that the forensic microscope markings on the spent bullet would prove that it was not, in fact, fired from his rifle. Despite an extensive search by police, neither the fatal bullet nor the spent cartridge were ever found. Although all prison authorised rifles were the same M1 carbine type, scientific forensic testing of the bullet would have proven which rifle fired the fatal shot. Every rifle leaves a microscopic, unique marker on the fired bullet as it travels through the barrel of the rifle. All the bullets in Ryan's M1 carbine rifle would be accounted for if Ryan cocked the rifle with the safety catch on. This faulty operation, conceded by prison officer Lang, Assistant Prison Governor Robert Duffy, and confirmed by ballistic experts at trial, would have caused an undischarged bullet to be ejected, spilling onto the floor of the guard tower. Opus established that for a person who is inexperienced in handling that type of rifle and its cocking lever, it would be easy to jam the rifle, and any attempt to clear the jam would result in a live round being ejected. On the 8th day of the trial, Ryan was sworn in and took the witness stand. Ryan denied firing a shot, denied the alleged verbal unsigned confessions said to have been made by him, and denied ever saying to anyone that he had shot a man. According to Ryan, they were after the reward money by making false allegations. "At no time did I fire a shot. My freedom was the only objective. The rifle was taken in the first instance, so it could not be used against me." After a trial in the Victorian Supreme Court lasting 12 sitting days, Ryan was convicted of the murder of Officer Hodson and sentenced to death by Justice John Stark, the mandatory sentence at that time. Asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Ryan stated, "I will still maintain my innocence. I will consult with my counsel with a view to appeal." And that is all I have to say. Walker was found not guilty of murder but guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years imprisonment. He was also found guilty of manslaughter for the death of Arthur Henderson and received a 12-year sentence. Walker was paroled in 1984 and he died on the 5th of March 2022 at the age of 80. According to juryman Tom Gilday, the jury evidently thought the death sentence would be commuted, as had happened in the previous 35 death penalty cases since 1951. Gilday's account of the discussions in the jury room: not one member of the jury thought that Ryan would actually be executed. Of the jury, 2 members held out the first vote we took, but 10 of us were sure he was guilty. He was a bit too sure of himself in the witness box, but the thing that decided us was handling the rifle which had killed Hodson. We had been told the rifle had a hair trigger, but when we examined it, we found we had to pull it at least half an inch, and that required quite a bit of force. 8 members of the jury were experienced with rifles, either in the country or overseas with war service. Gilday also said, "I don't know how much experience the judge and the lawyers had, but we all had our share in the jury box, I can tell you." When it was apparent that the Victorian government was intent on hanging Ryan, Gilday contacted the 9 other jury members he could trace. Gilday said that of the 12 jurors, 3 refused to sign petitions, 1 older man who was convinced of Ryan's guilt, and the 2 who believed Ryan was not guilty. 2 other jurors could not be contacted. 7 jury members, including Gilday, signed separate petitions requesting Ryan's death sentence to be commuted to life in prison. Later, some of the jurors came forth and stated they would never have convicted Ryan of murder had they known that he would in fact be executed. Gilday said, "We didn't want the rope. If we had known Ryan would hang, I think we would have gone for manslaughter." Opus decided to appeal against the murder verdict. The appeal was to the Victorian Court of Criminal Appeal, a bench consisting of 3 judges of the Supreme Court. The basis of the appeal was that the verdict was against the weight of evidence. He argued that as a matter of law, in the inherent inconsistencies and improbabilities and even impossibilities in the evidence. At the trial, there had been a legal argument on when the crime of escaping from jail had been completed. In the Crimes Act, a relevant section provides that every male person lawfully imprisoned for any crime who escapes shall be guilty of a felony. No exceptions. At the trial, Mr. Justice Stark had directed the jury. In certain circumstances, the crime of murder may be established even though the accused had no intention of killing. And that is so in these circumstances. If a killing occurs by an act of violence in the course of a commission of a felony involving violence, or in the furtherance of the purpose of such a felony, the accused is in fact guilty of murder, even though there was no actual intention of killing beforehand. There was a long legal argument on when the escape felony actually finished. Did it stop once Ryan and Walker left the prison, or did it continue until they were caught in Sydney 19 days later? The appeal was dismissed on the 8th of June 1966. On the 14th of October 1966, the full bench of the High Court of Australia rejected appeals by Ryan and Walker. With all legal avenues yet to be exhausted, legal aid to Ryan was cut by the Bolt government. Premier Bolt then directed the public solicitor to withdraw Opus' brief as the government was not going to fund the petition to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. Ryan had a right to increased free legal assistance for expert forensics analysis, to hire expert witnesses, and to present a series of appeals and recourses that were available to those facing execution by the government. The full court agreed that it was unthinkable that a man should be executed before he had exhausted his ultimate right of appeals. Opus decided to apply to the Privy Council in London. The appeal is a vestigial remnant of an appeal to the sovereign in person. On the 12th of December 1966, the State Executive Council, Premier Bolt's cabinet, announced that Ryan would hang on the 9th of January 1967. Opus, convinced of Ryan's innocence, agreed to work without pay. Opus consulted the Ethics Committee of the Bar Council to seek approval to make a public appeal for a solicitor prepared to brief him, as Opus was prepared to pay his travel, other expenses, and appear without fee. The committee said that this would be touting for business and was unethical. Opus argued that a man's life was at stake and he could not see how he would be touting when no payment was involved. Opus defied the ruling and on national radio sought an instructor. Opus was inundated with offers and accepted the first application, being from Ralph Friedman. Aline Kittle was in London completing a master's degree, and she agreed to take a junior brief, also without fee. On the 4th of January 1967, the State Executive Council stayed Ryan's execution, pending an approach to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. Wow, this is a lot. Opus then flew to London to present Ryan's case to the highest judges in the Commonwealth. Ryan's execution was delayed by Premier Bolt, awaiting the Privy Council's decision. On the 23rd of January 1967, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council refused Ryan leave for appeal. On the 25th of January 1967, the State Executive Council set Ryan's execution date as the 31st of January. On the 30th of January 1967, Justice Stark ordered a stay of execution following an affidavit from former prisoner John Tolmie, who said he saw a warder fire a shot from number 1 tower at the time of the murder. The following day, Tolmie was charged with perjury for making a false affidavit. He was in jail, and he was not in jail at the time of the escape. Bolt scheduled Ryan's execution for the morning of Friday, the 3rd of February 1967, a week before the dismissal of the appeal to the Privy Council was published in the Government Gazette. State government of Victoria had commuted every death sentence passed since 1951 after Robert Clayton, Norman Andrews and Jean Lee were executed for the torture and murder of an old man. And if you want me to, I'll try and look up that case as well if you're interested in hearing about it. Stark reported that the Premier of Victoria, Sir Henry Bolt, insisted that the death sentence be carried out. Bolt's cabinet was unanimous, although there were at least 4 state cabinet members who opposed capital punishment. When it became apparent that Bolt intended to proceed with the execution, a secret 11th hour plea for mercy was made by 4 of the jury members. They sent petitioning letters to the Government of Victoria, Sir Rowan Delacrombie, stating in reaching their verdict they believed that capital punishment had been abolished in Victoria and requested that the Governor exercise the royal prerogative of mercy and commute Ryan's sentence of death. Such Melbourne newspapers as The Age, The Herald and The Sun all ran campaigns opposing the hanging of Ryan. The papers ran a campaign of spirited opposition on the grounds that the death penalty was barbaric. Churches, universities, unions and a large number of the public and legal professions opposed the death sentence. An estimated 18,000 people participated in street protests and around 15,000 signed a petition against the hanging. The Australian Broadcasting Commission of the ABC suspended radio broadcasts for 2 minutes in protest. Bolt denied all requests for mercy and was determined that Ryan would in fact hang. On the afternoon of the eve of Ryan's hanging, Opus appeared before the trial judge, Justice John Stark seeking a postponement of the execution due to the opportunity to test new proffered evidence. Opus pleaded with Stark and said, "Why the indecent haste to hang this man until we have tested all possible exculpatory evidence?" Stark, however, rejected the application. Attorney General Sir Arthur Ryler rejected a second plea to refer Ryan's case to the full court under Section 584 of the Crimes Act. A third attempt to save Ryan in the form of a petition presented at the Crown Solicitor's Office pleading for clemency was also rejected. Close secrecy surrounded all government moves on the Ryan case. That evening, a former Pentridge prisoner, Alan John Cain, arrived in Melbourne from Brisbane in a new bid to save Ryan. An affidavit by Cain, which was presented to Cabinet, says he and 7 prisoners were outside the cookhouse when they saw and heard a prison warder fire a shot from number 1 guard post at Pentridge Prison on the day Hodson was shot. Police had interviewed these prisoners, but none were called on at the trial to give evidence. Cain was immediately rushed into conference with his solicitor, Bernard Gaynor, who tried to contact cabinet ministers, informing them of Cain's arrival. Gaynor telephoned the Government House, seeking an audience with Governor Sir Rowan Delacrombie. However, Gaynor was told by a Government House spokesman that nobody would be answering calls until 9 a.m, 1 hour after Ryan's scheduled execution. Gaynor said Cain's mission had failed. At 2300 hours or 11 p.m, Ryan was informed that his final petition for mercy had been rejected. More than 3,000 people gathered outside Pentridge Prison in protest of the hanging. Shortly before midnight, more than 200 police were at the prison to control the demonstrators. On the night before the execution, Ryan was transferred to a cell just a few steps away from the gallows trap door. A priest, Father Brosnan, was with him most of this time. At the 11th hour, Ryan wrote his last letters to his family members, to his defence counsel, to the anti-hanging committee, and to Father Brosnan. The letters were handwritten on toilet paper inside his cell and neatly folded. In the documentary film The Last Man Hanged, Ryan's letter to the anti-hanging committee is read out loud to the public. Ryan wrote, I state most emphatically I am not guilty of the murder. Ryan's last letter was to his daughters. It contained this line: with regard to my guilt, I say only that I am innocent of intent and have a clear conscience in this matter. Ryan refused to have any sedatives, but he did have a nip of whiskey and walked calmly to the gallows trapdoor. Ronald Ryan's last words to the hangman were, "God bless you, please make it quick." Ryan was hanged in D Division at Pentridge Prison at 8 a.m. on Friday, the 3rd of February, 1967. A nationwide 3-minute silence was observed by Ryan's supporters at the exact time that Ryan was hanged. Ryan's fellow prisoners staged their own protest. They refused to get out of bed, staged a sit-in, refused to work or obey orders, and there was an eerie silence throughout the prison. Later that day, Ryan's body was buried in an unmarked grave within the D Division prison facility. 40 years later, in 2007, the Victorian Premier John Brumby granted permission for Ryan's family members to have his body exhumed from Pentridge Prison after Hodson's daughters jumped and danced on Ryan's grave. Ryan's remains were cremated and placed next to his deceased ex-wife in Portland Cemetery. So, to describe Ryan was a slightly built man who stood 5'8", about 173 centimetres tall, and he had suffered an injury to his left eye as a child, resulting in a permanent droop of his left eyelid. He favoured expensive clothing, aiming to impress others, and aspired to be known as Australia's leading criminal. Don't know about leading, but probably most famous. He was above average intelligence and was described by people who knew him and prison authorities as a likeable character, but also a compulsive gambler. Arresting officer Detective Harding described Ryan as tough, plausible, and particularly difficult to question. He gave nothing away until he realised the game was up. So 19 years after Ryan's execution, a former warder, Doug Pascoe, claimed on air to Channel 9 and other media that he had fired a shot during Ryan's escape bid. Pascoe said his shot may have accidentally killed his fellow prison guard Hodson. Pascoe had not told anyone that he had fired a shot during the escape because at the time I was a 23-year-old coward. In 1986, he tried to sell his story, but his claim was dismissed by the police because his rifle had a full magazine after the shooting and he was too far away. So it's kind of sick trying to capitalise for your own self on somebody else's misfortune, whether it's a criminal or not. It's kind of not really the done thing. So I'm glad he didn't actually get what he wanted. Pascoe's claim was rejected by another former warder, Bill Newman. Newman claimed that he was in Tower 3 the afternoon of the escape and that Pascoe was in Tower 4. Tower 3 was 200 metres from the shooting and Tower 4 was 500 metres away. Police produced a photocopy of the duty roster for that day, which showed that Newman was meant to have been in Tower 3 and Pascoe in Tower 4. Though Opus claimed that the staff duty roster was virtually meaningless on the day of the shooting because prison officers were taking turns sitting in for their colleagues while they attended the annual staff Christmas party. Newman said that he returned to his Tower 3 at 1:45 p.m. and later signed statements for police. According to the duty roster, Robert Patterson was not on duty either, but in fact was on duty and was the one that fired a shot. Retired prison governor Ian Grindley said that Ryan told him straight out that he had shot but not meant to kill Hodson. Sister Margaret Kingston of the Good Shepherd Convent in Abbotsville said Ryan told her that he had shot Hodson but had not meant to kill him. So, 25 years later, after being a witness in Ryan's trial where he gave evidence claiming to have seen him commit the murder, a man broke his silence. A man broke his silence for fear the alleged killer was becoming a latter-day Ned Kelly. Oh, excuse me, I just had another big coughing fit, guys. I had to pause. Okay, let's try again. A man broke his silence for fear that the alleged killer was becoming a latter-day Ned Kelly. Les Watt wrote to The Australian, "Let me assure you and your readers that Ryan did kill Hodson." Watt spoke out after reading Philip Opus' comments and the latter's autobiography. Watt was one of 4 witnesses to testify seeing Ryan fire a shot. Watt said that it might well be proper for Opus to leave the bar, as his emotional involvement in the case had certainly distorted the facts, leading as it had to the suggestion that Ryan might not have fired the shot that killed Hodson. Watt, on the contrary, said that he saw Ryan take aim and fire, and he saw Hodson fall flat on his face and not move. "It was a sickening sight. I also witnessed a slight puff of smoke come from the carbine Ryan used. This was probably as a result of a bullet passing through the well-oiled barrel bore." Australian criminologist Gordon Hawkins said the director of Sydney's University Institute of Criminology doubts the damning validity of the unsigned confessions of Ryan in a television film documentary beyond reasonable doubt. Although verbal confessions are not permissible in court, in the 1960s the public, and therefore the jury, were much more trusting of the police. As to whether as a result an innocent man was hanged, there is at least a reasonable doubt following revelations of police corruption, here we go again, uncovered by various Australian police royal commissions. And as we know, particularly in that era, so you have to think that era. Sorry, I'm so retarded still. I need more sleep. Particularly in that era, and we're getting to the late 60s, into the early 70s, and we all know from all of the cases, pretty much all of the cases I've presented to you guys before, especially in that era, police corruption was running rife, and particularly in New South Wales. Australian police have to record or tape all interviews they carry out in connection with a crime. The police had no evidence of these unsigned verbal confessions. Ryan signed only a statement saying that he would not be giving any statements, verbal or written, to anyone except his lawyer. Hawkins questions why Ryan, a seasoned criminal, would suddenly feel the need to tell all to the police. In 1993, a former Pentridge prisoner, Harold Sheehan, claimed he had witnessed the shooting but had not come forward at the time. Sheehan saw Ryan on his knees when the shot rang out, and therefore Ryan could not have inflicted the wound which had killed Hodson, which passed in a downward trajectory. Authorised M1 carbine rifles, including that seized by Ryan from Lang, were issued loaded with 8-round balls. 7 of the 8 were accounted for in Ryan's case. If the 8th fell onto the floor of the prison watchtower when Ryan cocked the rifle with the safety catch on, thereby ejecting a live round, then the bullet that killed Hodson must have been fired by a person other than Ryan. In the letter opus on Ryan, The Innocence of Ronald Ryan, written to the Victorian Bar Association and published in the Victorian Bar News in spring 2002, Opus responded to an assertion made by Julian Burnside in reviewing Mike Richards' book The Hanged Man that Ryan was guilty. But while the verdict was correct, the punishment was wrong. Opus disagreed with this assertion, refusing to believe that at any time Ryan confessed to anyone that he fired a shot, denying the existence of any evidence whatsoever that Ryan ever confessed guilt to anyone, either verbally or in writing. Ryan gave evidence and swore that he did not fire at Hodson. He denied firing a shot at all. Ryan denied the alleged verbal confessions said to have been made by him. Opus says the last words Ryan said to him were, "We've all got to go sometime, but I don't want to go this way for something I didn't do." On the 26th of March 2003, just months prior to his death, Catholic priest Father John Brosnan was asked on ABC radio by journalist Kelly Day about Ryan, who was believed to have fired the fatal shot during the prison breakout. Brosnan said, "No, I won't make a hero out of him. He caused a situation. I don't know whose bullet killed who, but a friend of mine died. But I'll tell you what, he had heroic qualities," Father Brosnan said. George was a nice fellow, but his wife had left him, taking their 13-year-old daughter with her, and he didn't have much of a life. I used to talk to him at Pentridge and drop in to see him in St Kilda sometimes to cheer him up. On the 1st of March 2004, in an interview with the Australian Coalition Against the Death Penalty, Opus says, "I want to put the record straight. I want the truth told about Ronald Ryan, that an innocent man went to the gallows. I want the truth to be made available to everyone, for anyone young and old who may want to do research into Ryan's case or research on the issue of capital punishment. I will go to my grave firmly of the opinion that Ronald Ryan did not commit the murder. I refuse to believe that at any time he told anybody that he did." On the 23rd of August 2008, Philip Opus QC died after a long illness at the age of 91. Opus maintained Ryan's innocence to the end. Opus asked Australian Coalition President Doreen Lisson to keep fighting to clear Ryan's name. According to Miss Lisson, she and others are determined to have Ryan's murder conviction overturned because there was no scientific ballistic forensic evidence to prove Ryan guilty of the murder. That a wrongly convicted man was hanged based solely on unsigned, unrecorded, unproven hearsay allegations and of verbal confessions. For 35 years, Barry Jones, who was a member of both the Victorian and federal parliaments, refused to comment publicly on Ryan's hanging. Mr. Jones broke his silence in 2002 at the launch of Mike Richards' book, The Hanged Man. Mr. Jones said he remains unsure of whether Ryan ever pulled the trigger. "It seemed to me that there was probably a reasonable doubt in this case." Mr. Jones, also the former secretary of the Victorian Anti-Hanging Committee, says he believes Ryan's hanging was an attempt by then Victorian Premier Henry Bolt to push his law and order agenda. Justice Stark, the judge at Ryan's trial and a committed abolitionist, was convinced of Ryan's guilt but did not personally think that he should hang. Until his death in 1992, Stark remained troubled about Ryan's hanging and would often ask his colleagues if they thought he did the right thing. Philip Opus Jr. in the trial, Brian Burke, was filmed in 2005 saying, "One of the problems of Ryan's trial was an alleged admission that he made on the plane back to the Homicide Fellows. That sort of thing can't happen now because they've got to be recorded on tape. But whether he made the admission or was verbaled, I don't know. He was a pretty talkative fellow. He might have. I didn't have much doubt about his guilt." And that is where this story ends for now. As far as I know, they are still trying to have the murder conviction of Ryan overturned, and if there's any updates later on, I will let you guys know. So it's a very interesting case. Did he do it? Did he not do it? It would be nice to know if they actually do find the complete and utter truth of what happened that day. But the fact of the matter is that a good innocent man was killed. That Hodson, one of the prison warders there, was killed in performing his job. So I think for my money, I don't think they should have hung Ryan necessarily, but he did cause the situation in which Officer Hodson was killed. So you have to think, if they hadn't tried to bust out of prison, Officer Hodson would have gone home to his family and had Christmas with his family that year instead of winding up in the morgue as he did. So I think probably life in prison would have been an appropriate sentence for the gentleman. But because the witness details and there was no ballistics, it's very hard to say exactly what happened. But he did cause, I agree with what the other guy said, he did cause the situation that caused the other man to lose his life. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys think of this case. It was very long and convoluted, and it was a lot. So if you need a coffee or something after this, maybe go over it again, which I probably will. that's okay too. If you have your own ideas or anything you would like to share, please leave respectful comments in the comment section below and we can have a chat about this case. So they did bring up Ned Kelly in this case, and it just sprung to my mind that Ned Kelly is probably one of our most famous criminals. He was also touted as a hero. Whether he was, whether he wasn't, that's up to your own opinion. But I think just for a bit of fun, I think next Real Crime Down Under we might actually do a very special video about Ned Kelly and his gang, because there's got to be some of you out there who haven't heard about Ned Kelly before, or some of you who love Ned Kelly and would love him featured on the show. So I think for next week's Real Crime Down Under, we might have some time with our most infamous, famous, and weirdly most loved criminal, Ned Kelly. So thank you so much again to my lovely subscriber, Malcolm. I hope you enjoyed what I could find on this case. There's not a lot readily available, but I hope that I did my best for you. And thank you so much, Malcolm, again for the suggestion. And thank you so much for always supporting me and supporting this channel. There are a few of you who do it, so please speak up if you want me to cover cases for you. Even if you have a case that's from across the ditch in New Zealand, we might start branching out a little bit now. I've been doing Real Crime Down Under and everything else down under, as you know, for probably just over 7 months now. So we might start to branch out to Real Crime South Pacific. So if anybody has anything from New Zealand they would like me to cover, even if you have some New Zealand crimes you're interested in, or whatever, please let me know, because I'd be quite happy to cover anything from New Zealand as well. And I think by at least Christmas time this year I am going to start branching out and have like Real Crime International, because there are a lot of international cases I would also love to cover. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be running out of real crime and missing people and other things from Australia. So it's good in a way because I've always got material, but it's kind of upsetting as well because things keep happening and I keep uncovering things I didn't know happened. And yeah, it really does open your eyes to what is going on, particularly on your own doorstep when you're doing videos like these. So it's a kind of a bittersweet job that I do. I mean, these cases need to be brought up again and the facts given for people who don't know about them. And in the case of some of the victims, like Mr. Hodson, who was killed a couple of days before Christmas, and you have these horrific crimes like what happened to Anita Cobby and, Sally Ann, people like that. These are people that we cannot forget. They were put through hell at the hands of criminals, and their stories just keep needing to be told, which is why we do these videos. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry for all the stops and starts. I'm still not very well. I have had probably 5 coughing fits in the production of this video, but I kept going because I do miss making content. And I'm tired of being sick. I really am tired of, having to just succumb to sickness every few weeks. Anyway, so good to be back with you guys again. I missed you all so much last week. I was thinking about it while I was sick and I was like, not another week I can't do content. So the minute I felt even just a bit better, I had to get back on and do this video. So thanks everybody for being so patient with me. I know, I keep getting sick. And it's quite embarrassing for me. Nobody likes to be, oh, hey, guess what? I was sick again. But hopefully this is the last time. Pray for me, everybody. And have a very, very lovely week. I will try and get a couple more videos knocked out over the next few days to make up for me being off again last week. And stay safe, everybody. Take care. If you are living in Australia and it's cold where you are, like it is where I am, as you can see, I'm rugged up to the nines again. Please stay warm, drink your chicken soup, stay by your fires. Please don't get sick like I did because it's horrible. It's really horrible. And I love you all so much, and just your constant support means the world to me. You've got no idea what it's like for me when I see you guys popping up every week and you're liking and the new subscribers. I'm always so happy for new subscribers and for the people that look to talk to me on every video. I'm always so happy to see you and interact with you, and that's the best part of this job for me. So thank you all again from the bottom of my heart. I love you all so much. Oh, the appreciation I have for my subscribers, I can't even put it into words, because without you, there's no me. I'm not here if I don't have you guys. So you guys are a big part of this channel. So we're currently trying to grow it. We're at just over 300 now. So thank you to the just over 300 of you who have subscribed and who have stuck with me. It means a lot. We're trying to get to our first 1,000. So anybody who would like to help us out like that, it would be so appreciated. You have no idea. So anyway, I'm going to leave you guys now. I'm going to go and make myself some chicken soup and put my feet up. And I will see you all again very soon. Bye for now.